Chapter 12. A Ball of Fire. I wanted to hit him, but my phone started to ring. Not the phone I'd been given to contact Reichardt, but the phone I brought from London. "Don't answer it," Reichardt warned me. "It will tell them where we are." I looked at the number on the phone. "It's Amelia Bly," I said. "It could be important." I answered it. "Hi, Amelia." "Good evening," she said coolly. "Adam wants to speak to you." Then I heard Lang's voice. "I was just speaking to Ruth. She tells me that you're in New York. So am I. Where are you?" "I'm not sure," I said. I looked at Reichardt. "I haven't found a hotel yet." "We're at the Waldorf," said Lang. "Come over." "Just a moment, Adam." I put my hand over the phone and spoke to Reichardt. "He wants me to meet him at the Waldorf Hotel." Reichardt thought for a moment. "Go," he said, "or he'll get suspicious. Tell him yes, quickly, then switch off the phone." "Okay, Adam," I said. "Why are you in New York?" he asked. "I wanted to see John Maddox." I lied. Reichardt was signalling at me to switch off the phone. "Listen, I've got to go now." "We've had a good couple of days," Lang went on. "The Americans have been great. You discover who your real friends are when things get difficult." Was that some sort of message for me? I didn't know. "I'll be with you as soon as I can," I said. I ended the call. My hand was shaking. "Get your things ready," said Reichardt. "We've got about 10 minutes to get out of here." The lift to the lobby stopped at every floor, and Reichardt got more and more nervous. As we got out at the ground floor, he said, "We mustn't be seen together. Wait here a minute, then meet us in the car park." He walked on, and Frank met him on the way out. After a minute or two, I joined the crowd near the main door. That's when I saw Emmett. He had a man on each side of him and was walking into the hotel. Luckily, he didn't see me. Once I was outside, I ran with my suitcase and shoulder bag into the car park. Reichardt's car drove towards me and stopped suddenly. "Get in," said Reichardt. "I just saw Emmett," I said as the car drove off at speed. "Did he see you?" asked Reichardt. "No," I replied. I was very worried. Maybe it's not a good idea for me to go and see Lang now. Emmett might have told him about the photograph. He'll know what I've been doing. "So," said Reichardt, "you're just researching his Cambridge years like Makara. Don't act so guilty." The tall buildings of Manhattan appeared against the night sky. I said, "You realise that Lang is going to get $10 million for his memoirs and then retire here in America where the War Crimes Court can't get him?" "Maybe he will," said Reichardt, "but then he won't be able to travel anywhere in the world. Not even to the countries that don't recognise the ICC, because there'll always be a danger that his plane might have to come down somewhere with engine trouble, and we'll be waiting for him." Each time the car stopped in the traffic, I thought about opening the door and running away. But where would I go? "If you're worried, you can call me using the phone that Frank gave you," Reichardt said. There were police cars and a small crowd of TV reporters outside the Waldorf Hotel. Frank stopped the car on the corner of East 50th Street to let me out. The last view I ever had of Reichardt was the back of his head as the car moved back into the traffic. I went to the lobby desk and asked one of the clerks to phone Amelia's room. The clerk was just picking up the phone when a group of security men came across the lobby with Lang in the middle of them. Amelia and Lucy were behind them. Amelia was using her mobile phone, but when I moved towards the group, she saw me. "I was just trying to call you," she said. "We're flying back to Martha's Vineyard." "Why?" I asked. "I don't know," she said. "You'll have to ask Adam." Lang had reached the hotel entrance. The security men opened the doors, and we heard the shouts of reporters. "I'll go with Adam. You get into the second car," Amelia said. "Adam will want to talk to you on the plane." I felt sick with panic. We were now outside, and I saw Lang get into his car. I climbed into the back seat of the second car next to Lucy. A security man climbed in next to the driver and the car moved away. At the airport, I walked to the plane with Amelia. "Adam says he wants to go back to see Ruth," she told me. She sounded surprised. "There's something he needs to talk about with her." Once we were up in the air, Amelia told me that I could go and speak to Lang. He was sitting at the back of the plane, drinking brandy. "Hi, man," he said. "Hello, Adam," I said. I remembered that Reichardt wanted recordings, so I sat down opposite him and pulled out my mini recorder. "Found anything interesting?" he asked. Does he know something? Does he know about Reichardt and me? Something about the half smile on his face made me wonder. "I'm not sure," I said. "How was Washington?" "It was great," he said. "The Americans are going to help me in every way they can." "And could you stay here and live in America?" I asked. "Oh, yes, they'll let me stay here, but they're also going to give me something more important. Evidence." "Oh," I said. I had no idea what he was talking about. He nodded towards my mini recorder. "Is that working? Because this is important. We can use it in the memoirs." He moved closer to me. "Washington is ready to tell the court that no British people were involved in the capture of those 4 men in Pakistan." "Really?" I said. "Yes," he replied. "The head of the CIA will say that this was an American operation." "Okay, we had special forces in Peshawar at the time, and it was they who found the 4 men, but there's no proof that we told the CIA." "But we did tell them," I said. "There's no proof that we told the CIA," he repeated. "Then how did they find out?" I asked. "That's a difficult question," he said, "but it wasn't from me." He smiled. "What do you think?" He drank some of his brandy. "Well, you wanted the 4 men to be captured," I said, "and our special forces did find the men. And when the CIA got them and tortured them, you didn't try to stop it." He looked at me coldly. "I'm not sorry about what happened to those 4 men," he said. "What about the man who died?" I asked. "Oh, him," said Lang. "He had a heart problem. He could have died at any time." I said nothing and pretended to write in my notebook. "Look," he said, "I don't approve of torture, but it does work. Anyway, what are a couple of minutes of pain for 4 people when it stops the deaths of thousands?" "But those men said that they were innocent," I said. "Of course they did," he shouted. "What else were they going to say?" He looked at me closely. "I'm beginning to think that you're too naive for this job." "Unlike Michael Macara," I said. He laughed. "Michael was naive in a different way." The stars disappeared as the plane began to drop down through the clouds. I wondered if Lang was a little drunk. "Is it true that you had an argument with Macara just before he died?" I asked. "Michael made some serious accusations," he said. "What kind of serious accusations?" I asked. "Were they about the CIA?" "But you must already know," he said angrily, "if you've been to see Paul Emmett." And this time there was a very long pause before he went on. "I want you to understand that everything I did as party leader and Prime Minister, I did because I believed it was right. Emmett said that you showed him some photographs. Is that true?" My hands were shaking as I took the photos from the envelope and pushed them across the table to him. He looked through them, pausing at the one that showed him with Emmett, and then at a photograph of a group of students at a picnic by the river. "I remember her," he told me, pointing at a girl. "She wrote to me once, when I was Prime Minister. Ruth wasn't pleased. Oh, God." He passed his hand across his face. "Ruth." I thought that he was going to cry, but he looked up at me. "Where did you get them?" he asked. "Macara got them from Cambridge," I explained. "I found them in his room." "You never told me about them," said Lang. "What happens next?" Well, it's your book. You decide what goes into it, I said. But I remember what happened to Makara. Was he killed because of some of the things he knew, and to stop him putting them into the book? I don't know. You must believe me, his death had nothing to do with me, said Lang. But what was he doing driving up to Boston to accuse Emmett? He went on. In a way, he did kill himself. It was a suicidal thing to do. That worries me, I said. You really think that the same thing could happen to you? He said. It won't. He must have guessed that I didn't believe him. Oh, come on, he said. What kind of people do you think we are? I don't know, I said. What kind of people are you? We were coming into land now. He looked out of the window at the airport below, then back at me. A shocked look on his face. My God, you've already told someone, he said. I could feel my face getting hot. No, I said. You have, he said. Who have you told? Richard Reichardt, I said after a moment. He must have known then that it was the end of everything. He was silent after that, and seemed to become smaller in his seat. The plane landed and stopped near the terminal building. For once, I did something clever. As Amelia came hurrying towards us, I removed the disc from my mini recorder and put it in my pocket. Then I put a new disc into the recorder. Lang was too busy with his thoughts to notice. Amelia didn't see either. She was looking worriedly at Lang. Ruth's waiting in the terminal, she said. After a minute, he got up, staring around him. He looked lost. Amelia helped him put on his jacket. She looked angrily at me over his shoulder and mouthed silently, What are you doing? It was a good question. What was I doing? I put my mini recorder and the photographs into my shoulder bag and followed them to the door of the plane. The 4 security men surrounded Lang. I could see Ruth waiting on the other side of the window in the terminal building. Would you wait here a minute? Lang said to Amelia and me. I need to speak to my wife. We watched him from inside the plane as he went down the steps. There was nobody around except the security men and an airport worker. Someone must be working late, I thought. Lang was about 10 meters from the terminal when the airport worker shouted, Adam! And waved. The voice was English, and Lang must have recognized this because he walked several meters towards him with his hand out, ready to shake the other man's hand. And that is my last memory of Lang. Seconds later, there was a huge bang, and a growing ball of white fire that seemed to swallow him up. It was followed by flying broken glass and a terrible heat. And then there was complete silence. Chapter 13. The Return to London. I saw nothing more after that because there was too much glass and blood in my eyes, and it was several hours before I could hear again. A helicopter took me to a hospital near Boston. For the next day or two, I lay in my hospital room with bandages across my eyes and a policeman on guard in the corridor outside. Some days later, Special Agent Murphy of the FBI came to ask me questions. With him was an Englishman from the British Security Service, MI5. After my bandages were removed, they showed me a photograph of the suicide bomber. It was the crazy man who had sworn at me in the bar of the hotel. His name was George Boxer, a retired British Army officer. His son had been killed in Iraq, and his wife had been killed 6 months later in a suicide bombing in London. Boxer blamed Adam Lang for their deaths and had followed Lang to Martha's Vineyard just after Makara's death had been reported in the newspapers. He would have known that Lang was returning from New York when he saw the bomb-proof car leave for the airport to meet the ex-Prime Minister. But nobody was quite sure how he had got into the airport and close to the aeroplane. Mrs. Bly tells us that you recorded an interview with Mr. Lang on the plane, said the MI5 man. No, she's wrong, I said. I had the mini recorder in front of me, but I never switched it on. We just talked. My shoulder bag was next to my bed. I watched nervously as the MI5 man took out the mini recorder and removed the disc. "Can I take this?" he asked. "Yes, but there's nothing on it," I said. "How's Amelia?" "She's fine now," he said. "She flew back to London last night." "What about Ruth?" I asked. "Your government sent a plane to fetch her and Mr. Lang's body," said Murphy. "They're on their way back to England today." 2 days later, I watched Lang's funeral on the television news. The Queen, the Prime Minister, the US Vice President, and several European leaders were there. Ruth looked very good wearing black, I thought. I looked for Amelia, but didn't see her. The next day, when I was ready to leave the hospital, Rick came from New York to say goodbye and take me to the airport. "Sidney Crowell just called," he said. "Ruth Lang wants you to finish the memoirs, and Maddox will give you another month to work on the manuscript. You can work in London." "So now, I'm the ghost of a ghost," I said. After a moment's silence, Rick asked, "Did you like him?" I was feeling guilty. If I hadn't gone to see Emmett, he wouldn't have warned Lang about the photograph. Then maybe Lang wouldn't have flown back to Martha's Vineyard that night to see Ruth. Then I wouldn't have had to tell him about Reichardt. And then... "Yes," I said to Rick. "Yes, I did like him." And so I returned to London and spent the next 6 weeks working on the memoirs. I wrote nothing about Emmett, of course, and I followed Ruth's suggestion and said that Lang had entered politics almost accidentally because he'd been feeling depressed when he'd first come to London, and that he'd only really got interested in politics when he'd met Ruth 2 years later. Maybe it was true. I sent Ruth a copy of my manuscript and a week later received a letter from her. "You have done all that I ever hoped you would do, and more. You have brought him back to life. Please phone or come and see me when you have the time. Thank you again. Much love, Ruth." For some weeks after that, I stayed in my flat most days, watched television, ate very little food, and didn't answer the phone. I was depressed and confused about everything that had happened. Then, about 2 months after finishing the book, I put on a jacket and realised it was the same one I'd worn the night Lang was killed. In one pocket was the recording of my last interview with Adam. In the other pocket were the keys to the Ford Escape SUV. The car! I'd forgotten about it. It was still parked at Logan Airport. I telephoned Rick. "It's okay," he told me. "The men at the car park got suspicious and phoned the police. They called Reinhardt's office. Maddox paid the parking bill." "You sound terrible. Listen, I know a good doctor." I put down the phone. A day or two later, I phoned Amelia on her mobile phone. She didn't seem surprised to hear from me. "I was just thinking about you," she said. "I'm reading your book, Adam's book. It's good. No, it's better than good. It's like having him back. There's only one thing missing." "What's that?" I asked. "I'll tell you when I see you," she said. "Maybe at the party tonight." "What party?" I said. She laughed. "Your party, for the publication of the book. Haven't you been invited?" "I don't know," I said. "I haven't checked my mail for weeks." "Come as my guest," she said. "I'll meet you at the end of Downing Street at 7 o'clock. Don't be late." After that, I checked through my letters carefully. There was no invitation. Amelia came out of Downing Street just after 7 o'clock. She looked older and tired. "I didn't realise you were back working in number 10, I said. "I've been working here since Adam died." She seemed about to cry, and I put my arm round her. "Sorry," she said. "I can't seem to forget." "Neither can I," said. We walked across Whitehall to the banqueting house, through the crowds of spring tourists. The moment we stepped inside, I knew that it was a mistake to have come. A ghostwriter is never welcome at publishing parties, and I didn't know anyone. "I can't see Ruth," I said. I took 2 glasses of champagne from a waiter and gave one to Amelia. "It's Ruth who is missing from your book," she told me. "I know," I said. I wanted to put in more about her, but she wouldn't let me. "I loved Adam, and I think he loved me," Amelia said. "But I knew that he would never leave Ruth. He told me that during the last drive to the airport. She was the one who understood power. She was supposed to go into Parliament, not him. Did you know that?" "No," I said. "Tell me something. Before Adam died, why was it so important to keep that manuscript locked up?" Amelia looked around and then spoke quietly. "We weren't worried. It was the Americans. They told MI5 that there might be something at the beginning of the manuscript that might be dangerous to national security." "How did they know that?" I asked. "I don't know," she said. "But after Michael Macara died, they asked to see the book before it was published." "Did they see it?" I asked. "Again, I don't know," she said. What had Macara told Reichardt before he died? The answer could be found in Lang's autobiography if anyone checked carefully. It was all there in the beginning. I suddenly had the feeling that something important had just changed, but I needed time to think about it. Suddenly, I saw Ruth, and she saw me. She looked surprised and began to walk towards me. "I think Ruth's coming to speak to me," I told Amelia. "Then I'm getting out of here," she said. She moved away quickly to talk to somebody else. "Hello," Ruth said when she arrived beside me. Sidney Kroll was just behind her. "Hello, Ruth." "Hello, Sid," I replied. "Somebody told me you didn't like parties," she said. "So I didn't invite you. Did you get my letter?" "Yes, thanks," I said. And then she looked over my shoulder, and I saw a look of alarm pass across her face, followed by a tiny shake of her head. I turned around and saw Paul Emmett only a few feet away. "Hello," said Emmett. "I think we've met." I turned back to Ruth. I tried to speak, but no words would come. "Paul was my tutor at Harvard," Ruth told me calmly. "You and I must talk." "Ah," I said, walking backwards. Then I turned and almost started to run as I left the room. The moment I got outside, I knew that another bomb had gone off. There was smoke coming from somewhere behind Trafalgar Square, and policemen were turning people away from that end of Whitehall. I ran to Trafalgar Square, where I was able to get a taxi by pushing 2 people out of the way. The answer could be found in Lang's autobiography if anyone checked carefully. It was all there in the beginning. Once inside my flat, I picked up a copy of the finished book and started looking through the first few chapters, but I found nothing. Next, I went to my desk and got out Macara's original manuscript and began reading. Chapter 1. Lang's a Scottish people originally and proud of it. Chapter 2. Wife and child with me, I decided to make our home in a small town away from London. Chapter 3. Ruth saw that it was possible for me to become party leader a long time before I did. Chapter 4. Studying the work of other politicians, I decided. Chapter 5. In looking back, I can now see that the general election. Chapter 6. 76 separate security agencies looked after the security of. Chapter 7. Was there ever a land like Northern Ireland? Chapter 8. Recruited from all sorts of backgrounds. And Chapter 9. As is usual, all countries. Chapter 10. A big problem for the new government. Chapter 11. CIA opinions about the threat of terrorists. Chapter 12. Agent reports from Afghanistan. Chapter 13. In deciding to order an attack, I knew that. Chapter 14. America needs friends who are prepared to. Chapter 15. By the time. Chapter 16. Professor Paul Emmett of Harvard University has written. I took the beginnings of all 16 chapters and laid them out on my desk. I stared at them for a few moments. Then I put a line onto the first word of each chapter. And suddenly, there it was. A hidden message from Makara, who must have been afraid for his safety. Lang's wife, Ruth, studying in 76, was recruited as a CIA agent in America by Professor Paul Emmett of Harvard University. Chapter 14. No Way Back. I left my flat that night and never returned. Since then, a month has passed. I've stayed in 4 cheap hotels and, as far as I know, nobody has noticed. But about 3 weeks ago, after a long day's writing, I heard on the news that Richard Reichardt had been killed in a car accident in New York City. I knew then that I could never go back. I've written and thought about the things that happened, but I still don't know how Makara found out the truth. It may have been when he was researching in Cambridge. Reichardt suspected Emmett's involvement with the CIA, so it wouldn't be surprising if Makara had also. But Makara knew other things too. He would have known that Ruth had been to Harvard, and he could easily have discovered Emmett had been her lecturer. He clearly felt that he had to tell Lang his suspicions during the argument the night before he left to see Emmett. Almost every day I listened to that disc of my last conversation with Lang. The answer to everything must be there, I'm sure, but the whole story is still a mystery. Near the end of the recording, there is a long pause as he looks at the photograph of the girls on the picnic. When he speaks again, he sounds very sad. I remember her. She wrote to me once, when I was Prime Minister. Ruth wasn't pleased. Oh God, Ruth. I can hear that he's worried about his wife, and not himself. I guessed that she had called him that afternoon to report that I'd been to see Emmett and showed him some photographs. She would need to see him urgently because the truth was about to be known. Oh God, Ruth, what have you done? Is surely what he meant to say. Because that, I think, was the moment when he realised that Makara's serious accusations must have been true. His wife was a CIA agent. I would like to write more, but I need to move to another place. Strangers are starting to be suspicious of me. My plan is to put a copy of this manuscript into an envelope and give it to Kate. I shall put it through her letterbox in about an hour, before anyone is awake. There will be a letter with it which asks her not to open the envelope, but to look after it. And if she doesn't hear from me in a month, or discovers that something has happened to me, the letter then asks her to read the manuscript and try to get it published. Am I supposed to be pleased that you are reading this, or not? I'm pleased that at last I'm speaking in my own voice, but I'm also disappointed, because it almost certainly means that I am dead.